start up with the next chapter, that is our environment. Now, our environment has a many simple terms which is associated with the science field, that is food chain and food web. What is the food chain? It is a sequence in which the living organisms in a community consumes each other. Like if rat is eaten up by the cat, then cat is eaten up by the dog, then this is called as the food chain. It is a sequence in which the organisms or the living organisms are eaten up by each other. So this is known as a food chain. Now what is food web? Food web is the interconnected food chains. Only you can mention so much. What is a food web? It is the interconnected food chains. It maintains the balance of the ecosystem. So the next is, what is the difference between a biodegradable and non-biodegradable? Biodegradable, the substances which can be destroyed, which can be degraded by the earth, is known as biodegradable. Bio means life and degradable means which can be destroyed, which can be converted into a simpler forms, is known as biodegradable. What is non-biodegradable? It is the substances which cannot be degraded by the environment, which cannot be degraded or destroyed by the earth, such as plastic, metals, etc. Now, why this the classification of biodegradable and non-biodegradable is important? Like if you nowadays the garbage, the people who come to collect the garbage, they are telling us to distinguish the garbage into degradable and biodegradable and non-biodegradable. Why is it actually required? Because the non-biodegradable substances affects the soil fertility. If that waste is not being decomposed in the earth, then it will retain as such, and it will affect it will secrete a harmful chemicals which will destroy the quality of the soil. Therefore, the classification of the biodegradable and non-biodegradable is important. Now, how the biodegradable substances affect the environment? They increase the soil fertility. Like if you are decomposing the kitchen waste, if you are decomposing the other waste which can be degraded easily or decomposed easily in the earth's crust, then it will add up to the soil fertility, because it will lead to the production of a manure. Due to the biochemical reactions, the organisms act upon those waste and make up a manure which increases the fertility of the soil. So it helps in the it consists of the biodegradable substances, mainly contain the carbon, and these substances after decomposition release the carbon. Like if take the example of the gobar gas plant. In this, the formation of the manure takes place and the release of methane gas takes place. Methane is the hydrocarbon. So release of methane gas can be collected and used as a natural gas. So biodegradable substances can constitute to the two important uses. That is, one is it will increase the soil fertility, and the other is it consists of the carbon molecules, so that after decomposition it will release the carbon molecules in the form of methane gas or some other gases. Okay, now what is the role of decomposers in the environment? Why the decomposers means it will constitute to the many types of organisms which helps in degrading the biodegradable waste. Now what is their role? It helps in cleaning the environment. Like if something has been dumped into the earth's crust, if it has not been decomposed, then it will lead to the stinking, it will lead to the leakage of harmful chemicals into the soil, which will affect the purity, which will affect the fertility of the soil. So it will help to clean the environment. So then they will release the nutrients into the soil by decomposing dead and decaying matters, thus making the soil fertile. As I have mentioned, that if the decomposers are decomposing, then they will release some chemicals which will help in increasing the fertility of the soil. So the other is they will maintain the nutrient pool by returning back the nutrients in the pool. So whatever in and around the soil or water it is present, if they are present, they help in decomposition, as well as they will retain the nutrients by breaking down the substances. Okay, now another question is, how can you help in reducing the problem of waste disposal? Give any two methods. The first method is separating the waste into biodegradable and non-biodegradable, and the other is by differentiating the. First, you are going to separate the waste into biodegradable and non-biodegradable. Biodegradable waste is somehow going to be dumped into the earth's crust. But what about the non-biodegradable waste? Those waste are going to be divided into which can be reused and which can be recycled. So that even their decomposition or they can be reused, so to avoid the dumping of them. Okay, now the other question is, what is the important function of presence of ozone in the Earth's atmosphere? So ozone is known to control the UV radiations, which will have a very serious impact on the human beings. UV rays might lead to the skin cancer. It can lead to the cloudy appearance in the skin, cloudy appearance in your eyes. It can lead to snow blindness, and it can lead to cataract disease. So many other diseases are there. It can lead to it can mainly affect your, so you can it can mainly infect or mainly affect your skin, mainly affect your skin. Then the other thing what it can affect is your eyes. It can lead to snow blindness, cataract, and many other diseases. So these are the what is the important function? It absorbs the harmful UV radiation of the sunlight. So this layer is very important in the Earth's atmosphere. Okay, now the other question is, what happens when the higher energy ultraviolet radiations act on the oxygen at the higher level of atmosphere? So the reaction takes place. If oxygen is present in the Earth's atmosphere, then in presence of UV light by atmosphere, by sun, it will molecular oxygen is broken down into the atomic oxygen, that is 1 and 1. So this atomic oxygen atoms again goes, this 1 and 1 oxygen atom goes and reacts to the molecule of oxygen, giving rise to ozone. How is the ozone formed? When the molecular oxygen is, when the ultraviolet rays reacts upon the molecular oxygen, it leads to the decomposition of the molecular oxygen into a free oxygen atoms, which further reacts with the oxygen molecules and forms the ozone. That's it. So this was the important questions of our environment chapter. Nothing more important about this chapter because it has a less weightage, and most of the students neglect this chapter. Instead of neglecting it, it is easy for you to learn just the important questions. Okay. Now the other chapter which I am going to start is, how do organisms reproduce? So let us first study about the modes of asexual reproduction. Now, what is in every asexual modes of asexual reproduction, you need to remember what are the different types of reproduction in that certain type. Then what is its definition? Then its example. The first is fission. Fission means breaking down of the parent body into the daughter's body, into the formation of the daughter's body. This is known as fission. There are two types of fission. That is fission, binary fission, and multiple fission. Binary refers to two. When the parent's body is divided into two daughter cells, then it is known as binary fission. Now, what is multiple fission? When the parent's body is divided into many daughter cells, then it is known as multiple fission. Now, here you need to keep in mind that parent body is undergoing the cell division. This is the parent's body, and it is undergoing the cell division in order to give rise to the daughter cells. So ultimately the parent body is not going to be present after the cell division. The parent body itself is dividing through cell division in order to give rise to the two daughter cells. What are the examples? Amoeba and Plasmodium. Well, you can write either one or two examples. It is good if you write two examples for each of the mode of asexual reproduction. Now what is the other? It is fragmentation. Now as the name itself suggests, the organism breaks up into many pieces upon maturation. When it matures, when the organism matures, it will make a fragments, and each of the fragment will develop into a new daughter cells. So this is known as fragmentation. This occurs in the organism called as Spirogyra. The other is regeneration. Now if organism is somehow cut and broken into the many pieces, then like yeast, this is the yeast. Okay, if somehow it has been broken down, each part of it will regenerate. This is known as regeneration. If each part of a plant parent body will regenerate into a daughter cells. So this is known as regeneration. Example, it is Planaria hydra. You can just write it hydra. Okay, now what is the other is budding. Budding, like when the parent cell matures, it will develop a small outgrowth over it. It's like this. This bud in a favorable condition detaches from the parent body and falls on the substratum and grows into a new organism. This is known as budding. The example is yeast. Now the other mode of asexual reproduction is spore formation. Spores are very bulb-like structures which are covered by a thick walls. Under favorable condition, they germinate and produce new organism. Now what is spore formation? The organism such as rhizopus is developed. This is the rhizopus. Imagine this is the rhizopus. This is the rhizopus. Now in unfavorable condition, this rhizopus will start developing the spores, the bulb-like structures. Bulb-like structures covered with this wall. Okay. Now this part is known as sporangia. Okay, and this is known as sporangiophore. Now in a favorable condition, this sporangia will rupture and these spores will fall on the suitable substratum and develop into a new rhizopus. This is known as spore formation. Example is rhizopus, the bread mold. If you are seeing the bread, sometimes if you keep it open or you will tell it as fungus. Yes, it is a fungus, but it is a type of a fungus such as rhizopus which develops by forming the spores, which will give a black color to the substratum due to the presence of spores called developed in the sporangia of the organism. Now the other mode of asexual reproduction is vegetative propagation. Okay. Now in this vegetative propagation type of asexual reproduction, in this the vegetative part, such as if a plant is having root, stem, leaves. Normally the reproductive part of a plant is flower, right? If the development of a new plant is happening by the vegetative parts such as roots, stem, leaf, then it is known as vegetative reproduction. The reproduction of a new organism from the vegetative part of an organism or vegetative part of a plant is known as vegetative propagation. Okay, the example is by roots. If by roots, you can name it easily. It is potato, sweet potato. It is developed from roots, and from stem it is potato and the ginger. and by leaves it is bryophyll. Okay, so other type of asexual reproductions are of artificial methods. Mention the artificial methods of asexual reproduction. It is grafting, cutting, layering and tissue culturing. Okay, now what is grafting? Advanced technique to add living tissue from one plant to another vascular tissue. Grafting, if this is a rose plant and this is also a rose plant, these rose plant give rise to red roses. This plant will give rise to the white roses. If the grafting method is being employed, this is the red, this is the white. These two are tied together and being grown in the soil, giving rise to the pink roses. This is known as grafting. Okay, mostly it is been done for the mango. Okay, now the other artificial method is cutting. Plant section originating from stem, leaf or root and capable of developing into a new plant. Like cutting and planting the each part of a plant, like stem, leaf or root. If you are taking the part of a bryophyllum and you are inserting in the soil, then it will regrow into a new plant. So this is known as cutting. The rose plant, if a stem of a rose plant is being planted into a pot, then it will develop into a new plant. This is known as cutting. Now what is layering? First the roots are formed on the stem of a mother plant and only after the stem is cut off and is planted as a new plant. Okay, now first the roots are formed on the stem of a mother plant. Roots are formed on the stem of a mother plant. This is been taken, this part is been taken and planted into a new pot or new soil, then that part of a plant will develop into a new plant. This is known as layering. Now what is tissue culture? The example for layering is jasmine. Now the other is tissue culture. Now tissue culture is the growth of tissues or cells in the artificial medium separated from the parent organism. This is mainly done by the ornamental plants orchid. Orchid is a type of a plant which is the ornamental, and it is this technique is employed in order to grow the plants, in order to grow the orchid plants. Okay. The other tissue is the tissue culture, means taking the tissue or the cells from the mother plant, taking the cells and the tissues from the mother plant. For example, the orchid. The example, orchid, if you are taking the tissue or the cells from the mother plant and growing and taking it into an artificial medium in a laboratories and growing that part, and that part is totally separated from the parent body, then this is known as tissue culture. Now the other question is, okay, I think you people have understood what is the modes of asexual reproduction. It is the fission, fragmentation, regeneration, budding, spore formation and vegetative propagation or vegetative reproduction. Okay. Now mention the artificial methods of asexual reproduction, means you need to mention about grafting, cutting, layering and tissue culture. Okay. So the other question is reproduction in higher plants. Now in the parts of a flower, what are the parts of the flower? Calyx, corolla and androecium and gynoecium. This is known as calyx or sepals. The small leaves which appears near this type of petals. Near the petals you will see a small leaves growing, that is known as sepals. Like if you are taking the rose plant, the rose will have, this is the rose, I am showing you the back side of it, you will have like this, right? And from here the stem rises. These are known as sepals. The scientific name of sepals is calyx. Okay? Corolla, it is the petals of a plant. Petals. Now androecium and gynoecium. Androecium is a male part of a flower. It consists of the stem. Okay. This is anther. This is filament. Together it is known as stem. Now pistil, it is a female part. Gynoecium is a female part of a flower and it is known as pistil. It consists of stigma, style and ovary. Ovary is present here. Stigma, style and ovary. Okay, now the parts of the flower. Now you need to explain the reproductive part of your higher plant, that is flower. Now it consists of the calyx, that is sepals, petals, that is corolla, and the male and the female part of a flower, it is known as androecium, gynoecium. Okay. Now what is androecium, gynoecium? Androecium is the male part of a flower which is also known as stamen, and the gynoecium is the female part of a flower which is also known as a pistil. Androecium consists of anther and filament, and gynoecium consists of stigma, style and ovary. Okay. So what are their functions? What are the respective functions which they perform are, like sepals, it will protect the flower in its bud form. When the flower is in bud form, how does the bud look like? Like this. The bud does not reveal the color of a flower which is growing. So it is totally covered with a green part, right? That is known as sepals. Okay. Petals, it is a colored part, and it is meant to attract the insects which will bring about pollination to help them grow. So petals are meant to attract the insects which will bring them pollination. Now what is the function of androecium? It consists of the pollen sacs, forms pollen grains. It supports to anther. Okay, what is the function of anther? It is going to consist of the pollens, sacs of the pollens, and this is meant to support this part, that is anther. Now what is the functions of stigma? It receives pollen grains. Like if the insect is coming and sitting onto the flower, it is going to drop the pollens. These pollens are received by the stigma. The functions of the stigma is to receive the pollen grains. Okay. Now style is it will link the stigma and ovary, because the fusion and multiplication and the formation of the seed in the zygote takes place in the ovary. So it will link the stigma and the ovary by means of style. Okay. Now what does it consist of? Ovules, and it is a site of fertilization. It consists of ovules. It is the ovary. Ovules are present. This is the style. The pollen grains passes through the style and reaches the ovary and fuses with the ovule, and the fertilization takes place. So this is the reproduction in higher plants. How does it actually occur? You need to explain it in the part-wise form, like each part and their functions, so that it is easy for you to remember it also, and it is easy for the evaluator also to evaluate if you are mentioning the functions of each of the part. Okay. So this is the end of the chapter called as how do organisms reproduce. Now let us move on to the other chapter, that is the reproduction in human beings. Now what is the reproduction in human beings? The first important question is, what are the changes at puberty in the boys and girls? Now in boys you need to write it 4 points for each boys as well as for the girls. Now for the boys it is thick hair grown in the armpits and the genital area. It is same for the girls also. The other point is skin becomes oily for the boys. Skin becomes oily and may result in pimple. Same applies to the girls also. Skin becomes oily and may result in pimple. Now the last two differences are different for the boys and for the girls. For the boys, the thick hair growth on the face and voice begins to crack, whereas for the girls it is breast size begins to increase and girls begins to menstruate. These are the changes which occurs in boys and girls at the time of puberty. Okay. So the other important question is, how does embryo get nourishment inside the mother's body, or explain the role of placenta? Okay. Now it can be explained in 4 points. Let me explain you. When the egg in a mother is being fertilized, that is after fertilization, the lining of the uterus, the lining of the uterus thickens. Why does it thicken? Because it is richly supplied with blood. Why is it richly supplied to nourish embryo? The first point is, the lining of the uterus thickens after fertilization occurs in the uterus due to the supply of blood, and this rich supply of blood nourishes the embryo. Now the other point is, the embryo gets nutrition from the mother's blood with the help of a special tissue called placenta. Now embryo gets nutrients. There are 4 means by which the embryo gets its nutrition. First is first from the uterus lining, then it gets the nutrients from the mother's blood. Now how does this blood reaches to the embryo? By a tissue called as placenta. Okay. This is the second point. And the third point, which is embedded in the uterine wall, placenta contains villi on the embryo side of the tissue and blood spaces on mother side surrounding the villi. The embryo is being embedded in the uterine wall. if this is the uterine wall, then the embryo is embedded in it, and the placenta, which is the tissue, it consists of the villi. This villi on the embryo side of the tissue contains villi on the embryo side of the tissue and blood spaces on mother's side surrounding the villi. Placenta helps in transporting the mother's blood to the embryo in order to get the nutrients for the embryo. This provides a large surface from mother to the embryo and waste products from embryo to mother. Okay, now placenta acts as a link between the mother and the embryo. The nutrients, the important gases, everything is being passed to the embryo with the help of a placenta, and the waste generated by the embryo is passed from the embryo to the mother's blood by means of placenta. So it is a link between the mother and the nutrients. It is the important things are going from the mother's blood to the embryo by means of placenta, and the waste products generated by the embryo is passed to the mother's blood with the help of placenta. Okay, the 4 points. They are through the uterus lining, which is nourished with a rich supply of the blood, and the other is from the placenta. That is placenta. It is the nutrients have been first given to the embryo by means of placenta. Then it acts as a link between the mother and the embryo in order to supply the nutrients, important gases from the mother's blood to the embryo. Now, what is the other part is what is human male reproductive system? It consists of 4 parts, that is testis, vas deferens, prostate gland, and seminal vesicles, and the penis. Now, functions of each. Testis. Now, what is the part name is testis, and its function is male germ cell, that is sperm, are produced. Testis is responsible for the production of a male germ cell, that is sperm, and it releases the testosterone hormone, which brings about the secondary sexual characters in the male. Okay, so it is responsible for the production of the male germ cell, that is the sperm, and it releases the testosterone hormone, which brings about the secondary sexual characters in the male. The other part is vas deferens. It passes the sperms from testis to urethra. It is the tube-like structure which passes the sperm cells from the testis to urethra. Okay, so the other part is the prostate gland and the seminal vesicles. The function of the prostate gland is it adds secretion to the sperms to nourish the sperms and make the transport easy. Okay, prostate gland is meant to nourish the sperm. It provides the nutrients such as calcium, etc. in order to nourish the sperm cell and facilitate the easy movement of the sperm from the testis to urethra. Now the other part is seminal vesicles. It stores the sperms and secretes seminal fluid that makes the sperm active. The seminal vesicles, it has 2 functions. First is it will store the sperm, and the other is it helps in the formation of the seminal fluid, which carries the sperm and nourishes the sperm. Now the last part is penis. The function of the penis is to deliver the semen into the vagina during the sexual intercourse. It acts as a part which helps in delivering the semen from the male to the female. Okay. Now the other question is human female reproductive system. This also consists of the 4 important parts. They are ovary, fallopian tube or oviduct, uterus and vagina. Okay. Now the first part is ovary. It helps in producing the female gametes. Like the testis was responsible for the formation of the male gametes, that is called as sperm. Now here it is responsible for producing the female gamete, that is eggs. Okay. The other part is it releases the estrogen hormone that provides sexual characters to the secondary sexual characters to the females. Okay. Like there it was testosterone. Here it is estrogen. The other function of the ovary is one egg is produced every month by one of the ovaries. Each ovary will produce only one egg in a month. So this is the function of the ovaries. First is then production of the female gamete, that is egg. Then production and release of the secondary sexual character hormone called as estrogen. And the last is production of one egg per month by each ovaries. Okay. The other is fallopian tube and oviduct. It receives eggs from the ovaries and transfer it to the uterus, where the uterus is the site of fertilization. So there it was vas deferens, which was carrying the sperm from the testis to the urethra. Now here it is a fallopian tube or the oviduct, which helps in carrying the egg from ovaries to the uterus. Now what is the function of uterus? Like it is a bag-like structure where the development of the baby takes place. Like it acts as a site for the fertilization, and all the development of the embryo and the baby takes place in the uterus. Now the functions of the vagina. Now it can to carry the menstrual fluid out of the body. It helps in carrying out the menstrual fluid which occurs during the menstrual cycle in the females. It helps in carrying that fluid out of the body. Okay. The other function is it provides pathway for the birth canal at the time of parturition. Now what is parturition? It is the delivery time when the baby is fully developed. It acts as a passageway. Like it is the way from where the baby comes out. Okay. The other function is it also receives the penis and ejaculate, assisting in the transport of the uterus. It like as mentioned in the male reproductive system, the penis helps in delivering the semen into the vagina. So vagina acts as a site to carry the sperm and transport it to the ovules. Okay. The next important answer question is, what are the sexually transmitted disease? That is STD. What are the sexually transmitted disease? Bacterial diseases, which is caused by the bacteria. It is two types, gonorrhea and the syphilis. Okay. Now what is viral disease? There are two types of STDs, bacterial and the viral disease. The example of bacterial STD disease is gonorrhea and syphilis. The viral disease is genital warts and HIV, which is the AIDS. Okay. Now what are the different methods of contraception? What do you mean by contraception? Contraception is the methods employed in order to prevent pregnancy. Okay. There are four types of contraceptive methods. That is the physical barrier method, chemical method, intrauterine contraceptive device, that is IUCD. Then the surgical method. Physical barrier. The role of this method is to prevent the union of egg and the sperm. Like examples of condoms and the cervical caps, which are inserted into the male parts which is inserted the cervical caps are inserted into the vagina of a female, whereas the condom has been worn on the male part of a reproductive system in order to prevent the union of egg and the sperm. Okay. Now the other method is chemical method. Change hormonal balance of the body so that eggs are not released. Oral pills. Like the ovaries are meant to release the egg per month, right? If you are taking the hormone which prevents that, then it can help you from not getting pregnant. Okay. The other is intrauterine contraceptive device. So the role of this device is to insert into the uterus to prevent the union of the egg and sperm. Like the physical barrier itself, these are the devices which are inserted into the vagina of a female in order to prevent the union of the egg and the sperm, and hence the fertilization is being stopped. The example, the tools which are used are copper T. Now the other method is surgical methods. There are two types of surgical methods, such as the vasectomy and the tubectomy. As the name itself suggests, vasectomy occurs in males, and in this method the vas deferens is blocked to prevent the sperm transfer. Like vas deferens is the part of a male reproductive system which is meant to carry the sperm from the testis to urethra, right? So if that is blocked, then the fertilization can be prevented. Now pubectomy, this occurs in females. This has been done in the females. The fallopian tube, the oviduct, also plays the same role as that of the vas deferens. Like even that carries the sperm from the testis to the urethra. Here fallopian tube and the oviduct carries the egg from the ovaries to the uterus, right? So if these two tubes are blocked, then the fertilization can be prevented. These methods are the surgical methods which have been done in order to prevent the contraception, in order to prevent the getting pregnant, fertilization. Okay, so this was the end of the chapter. Now the next chapter is heredity and evolution. In heredity and evolution, the important questions are monohybrid cross and a dihybrid cross. Monohybrid cross is the cross which occurs between the organisms having one contrasting character. Contrasting character refers to opposite to one another, like tall, dwarf. If it is tall, dwarf, then this is the one pair of contrasting character. And if the cross is occurring between these types of plants, then it is known as monohybrid cross and the dihybrid cross. Dihybrid cross refers to the cross between the organisms having two contrasting characters, then it is known as the dihybrid cross. In monohybrid and the dihybrid cross, the important things what you need to remember in your mind is the formation of the F1 generation, formation of the F2 generation, phenotype, genotype. F1 generation is formed when the when the parent organisms, when the cross occurs between the parent organisms, and the generation which is formed is F1. And if the F1 generation is undergoing the cross, then the generation which is formed is known as F2 generation. The phenotype of the monohybrid cross is 3:1, and the genotype is 1:2:1. You need to by heart these ratios in order to write this. So the phenotype of the dihybrid cross is the 9:3:3:1. Okay. Now the genotype is 12, 1:2:2:4. I think it is not mentioned in your syllabus here, so you can just write the phenotypic ratio. Okay. Now, what is the sex determination? How the sex of the organism of the newborn is predicted? It occurs by the chromosomes. The 6 chromosomes in a human being. There are 23 pairs of chromosomes. Out of these, 22 pairs are called autosomes because they are not involved in the sex determination. The one pair which is involved in the determination of the sex is known as sex chromosomes. Now in female, it is the chromosomes have been named as X's, and in male it is named as X and Y. When the father and when these chromosomes are crossed, then X, Y. Now X, Y. X, female. XY, XX, female. XY, male. Okay. So the four times the same thing occurs 4 times. XX, XY. Okay. So this is how the sex determination takes place. Now, what are the factors which could lead to the rise of a new species? The factors are natural selection, genetic drift, and acquisition of traits during the life of an individual. Natural selection refers to a selection by the nature among the fittest of the organisms. Now, what is genetic drift? Genetic drift is the genetic migration which occurs in the organisms. If the organism has been migrating from one geographical area to the another geographical area, then it is known as the genetic drift. Now what is acquisition of the traits? Like the organism is acquiring the traits due to the changes occurring in the environment. Then this leads to the rise of the new species. If the natural selection occurs, if the nature is selecting a particular organism, then the rise of new species takes place. If the organisms are migrating from one geographical area to the another geographical area, then the rise of new species takes place. Then if the organism is acquiring a new traits due to the changes in the environment, then the rise of new species takes place. Now the other question is, what are fossils? Fossils are the remains of organisms that once existed on the earth. Fossils, if the traits, the bones or the some other part of an organism, if it is existing on the earth as a fossil and as a remain, then it is known as fossil. These fossils helps us to know the development of the structures from simpler structures to the complex structures. It helps in the reading. It is the paleo microbiology. The field which involves the study of the fossils is known as paleomicrobiology. Therefore, this involves the studying of fossils, like how the simple structures they developed into a complex structures. The fossils helps us to know about that. Okay, the phases of evolutions through which they must have undergone in order to sustain. It can help us to learn about the it can help us to learn about the organisms which existed before us, that what they undergo, what the structures they are having, and what made them what made the change in their structure, what difference would have occurred in the past, so that the change of a structure in an organism has occurred. All this can be learned by with the help of a fossil. Okay. What are the terms analogous and the homologous? Homologous organs are those organs which have the same basic structural design but origin but have a different function. Like example of forelimbs of humans and the wings of the birds. They have the same origin, they have the same design, but their function is different. Right? The forelimbs we are using and the forelimbs what a bird is having is being used for the different purposes. They are using for the flying, we are using for some other purpose. Right? So they are having the same origin and the structural design but different function. The opposite of this, that they are the same function, the organs of organisms who have the different structural design and the origin but the same function is known as analogous organs. The example for the homologous is the forelimbs of the humans and the wings of the birds, whereas the example of the analogous organs is the wings of the birds and the insects. Their origin and the design is different, but they are used for the same purpose, that is flying. Okay. What is the importance of fossils in deciding evolutionary relationship? I have already said you, so you can elaborate on that. Now, what is speciation? Formation of new and distinct species in the course of evolution from the existing species. Okay. As I have mentioned before, that is what are the factors could lead to the speciation. Speciation refers to the development of a new species from the existing species is known as speciation. Now, what are the factors? Natural selection, genetic drift, and the geographical isolation. Now, the other differentiate between the acquired and the inherited traits. What do you mean by acquired traits? If the organism is acquiring the traits, is undergoing the changes and is adapting to the change in the environment, then the traits which are developed by that adaptation is known as acquired traits, whereas the inherited traits refers to the traits which are present as soon as the organism was born. These are the differences between the acquired and the inherited traits. The acquired traits they cannot be passed through the progeny because they are not inherited, right? But whereas the inherited traits can be passed to the progeny. Okay. So, what are the examples of acquired traits? Dancing ability in the man. If the person is dancing, then you cannot tell that the progeny also will have a dancing ability. So these cannot be transmitted. This cannot be transferred from the parent cell to the mother cell. Whereas the inherited traits, that is skin color of a man, can be transferred by means of genes. Okay. Now, what are the two methods to estimate the age of the fossil? The relative method, if we dig into the earth, the soil, the fossil we find closer to the earth's surface are more recent than the fossils we find in the deeper layers. The relative method, it is common sense. If the fossils are found at the upper crust of the earth, then then we can assume that this organism was recently being developed, being present in that soil layer. But if it is found in the deeper layers of the earth's crust, then we can say that it is much older than the present generation of that organism. By detecting the ratios of the different isotopes of the same element in the fossil material, that is carbon dating method, it can, by using that method also you can know the date or the age of the fossils. Okay, now this is the end of the chapter by name Heredity and Evolution. The important chapters and important questions were monohybrid, dihybrid cross, sex determination, now about the fossils, then about the speciation and the factors, then the difference between the analogous and the homologous organs, then the difference between the acquired traits and the inherited traits. Now the other chapter is, the last chapter of the biology is the sustainable management of natural resources. Now, what do you mean by sustainable management of the natural resources? Sustainable management refers to the management of the natural resources in order to facilitate the ability of the future generation to satisfy their needs. Because if we are the present generation, if we are using the natural resources to extreme, then the future generation will not have it. So if we are using it in a sustainable way, then it is known as sustainable management of the natural resources. What are the effects of deforestation? First question is, what are the effects of deforestation? The effects of deforestation, you can write it in your own words. Extinction of the plants and animals, then threatening of indigenous people whose culture and the physical survival depends upon the forest, like the tribal people, even their species even their generation, even their families and even their existence can be harmed due to the deforestation, because their habitat itself is a forest. Then regional and the global climate change, because if the plants are known to maintain the ecological balance. So if the trees are cut, then the regional and the climatic changes can appear. Then the global warming, increase in the mean temperature of the earth, then increase in soil erosion. If the plants are meant to hold the soil, which helps in increasing the soil fertility and prevents the soil erosion. Soil erosion is what? The washing of the upper layer of the soil. If that is being prevented due to the presence of roots in the soil, then even that is harmed if the deforestation occurs. Okay, the other is increase in floods. So these are the effects of deforestation. The other is, what do you mean by water table? Why is it important? Okay, water table, the level of water under the ground is known as water table. How much of the water is the level of water? How much of the water is present in the ground is known as water table. And what are the advantages? Instead of evaporation, the stored underwater recharges the wells by spreading out. Okay, now instead of evaporation, if the water table is maintained, then the stored underground water only will recharge the wells. The wells will be not evaporated, will not be dried if the water table has been maintained. It also provides the moisture for the vegetation over a wide area. It remains protected from contamination from animal and the human waste. It does not provide breeding ground for the mosquitoes. Now, what are the benefits of the water harvesting? It provides good quality of water for the homes. Then self-sufficiency for supply of water. You need not depend on some other source for the water. You can have the source of water at your home itself. Then control over the water sources. If the rainwater which goes in the vein, which goes into the drainage, has been collected and used very effectively, then the scarcity of the water can be reduced. Okay, so what are the water resources managed and how are water resources managed and consumed? You can install the rainwater harvesting. Then the leakage of the water from the toilets and the pipes should be repaired in order to prevent this the leakage of these pipes into the soil, which can affect the quality of the soil. Okay, so domestic water wastage and the and try to recycle the wastewater. Like if you are using a water for some purpose, then that water can be used for some other purpose in your home itself. Then instead of throwing that water, you can use that water for that purpose, and you can prevent the scarcity of the water by this means. Now, what are the problems faced by the construction of large dams? You can write it on your own. Like if the dams are very big, if they are going to, those have to be constructed, then the deforestation must occur. Then the building, then the locality of the people shall suffer many things. So these are the problems which is faced by construction of the large dams. Find out about the traditional systems of water harvesting. Okay, now you can write it 4 types. The 4 traditional systems of water harvesting, that is Pading tanks and the nadis in Rajasthan, Bhandaras and Tals in Maharashtra, Ahars and Pines in Bihar, and Kattas in Karnataka. Okay, these 3 things which increase pressure on our natural resources. More people use, then keeping fan on when there is no one in the room, wastage of food, burning of crackers, wastage of petrol by unnecessary starting the motorbike. This all thing you can write on your own as it is related to your normal life, day-to-day life. What are the factors to check the quality of the water? Now, what are the factors and the total coliform count? In human intestine, the bacteria is present called as coliform, E. coli. Okay, when these bacteria are present in the water, then it means that the waste is been present. Excreta of the humans is present, which can cause the diseases. Then the pH of the water, if the water is acidic or more basic, then it is said to be polluted. It should be neutral. The water is said to be neutral. Okay, so if that is defect, if that is been defective, then it is then the water is sure to be polluted. Now, heavy metals and the pesticide. The amount of heavy metals like copper, zinc, lead. How does these metals goes into the water bodies? By the industrial waste. If the industrial waste is so much, if the industrial waste is been let out in then it is said to be then the amount of heavy metals like copper, zinc and all will be sent into the water bodies, and the concentration will increase, which leads to the pollution of the water. Okay, what changes can you make in your habitat to become more environmental friendly? Then you can write it on your own. What are the results of Chipko movement? The Chipko movement spread across their community, which also awakened the media. You can write it. What are the results? The local people believed in the replenishment of the plants by cutting the unwanted branches and plucking the leaves in such a way that the plant may find time to replenish. What are its results? The trees were the 365 people had lost their life in this movement. Then the trees, it gave an awakening signal to all other people to take up a step to prevent deforestation. Okay. Now, what changes would you suggest in your home in order to be environmental friendly? You can write it on your own. You can write in a simple form that we shall follow the principle of 3 R's. What is this 3 R's? Reduce, recycle and reuse. Reduce the production or reduce the production of the waste in your home. Then recycle. The recyclable plastic, paper, glass, metal can be reused. Those can be segregated and can be reused. And then the recycling processes can be recycled and sent to the industries which can recycle them. So this is the end of the last chapter of the biology, that is sustainable development. Now the remaining as per the plan is the 4 laws and the 4 differences. Let me finish it so that we can wind up with the class. Okay. Now the 4 laws are. Now what is the Ohm's law? Ohm's law states that the current through the conductor between 2 points is directly proportional to the voltage across the 2 points. Okay. Now what is the Ohm's law? You just remember this formula. V is equals to IR. V is equals to IR. You can explain this only according to Ohm's law. The voltage between the 2 points is directly proportional to the current and the resistance, to the current or the resistance, or you can say it vice versa. that the current through the conductor between the 2 points is directly proportional to the voltage across the 2 points. The current resistance here, you can mention it or you need not mention it, you can just say it. The current between the 2 points is directly proportional to the voltage across the 2 points. Like if the current is, voltage is something which resists the current. The amount of current present in the 2 points is present between the 2 points is directly proportional to the voltage. Now the other law is state the Joule's law of heating. The amount of heat produced in a current conducting wire is proportional to the square of the amount of current that is flowing through the wire. Okay. Now when the electrical resistance of the wire and the time of a current flowing are constant. Now these are the laws which you need to by heart, by understanding, so that laws cannot be changed. You cannot write it in your own words. You have to write it in the exact form. That is why they are called as laws. The amount of heat produced is in a current conducting wire is proportional to the square of the amount of current that is flowing through the wire when the electrical resistance of the wire and the time of the current is constant. Now just to see, if you are having a wire and the current is then flowing through it, the heat of that wire is totally dependent on the amount of the wire, amount of the current that is flowing through the wire. This is what the Joule's law of heating says. Now the heat is produced in a resistor is H. Okay, now you can write it in two forms. State the Joule's law of heating: directly proportional to the square of the current for the resistance for the given resistance, directly proportional to the resistance for a given current, then directly proportional to the time for which the current flows through the resistance. These are the 3 points which you need to write. It is present in your textbook. You can write it as it is. But still, if you want these notes from which I am teaching you, you can comment below so that I will send you in the PDF form. You can join us on the WhatsApp group by messaging on this number, and you will get a PDF form of notes so that you can have a quick glance on all the important questions. That is the passing package. Okay. Now the other answer, the question is, state right hand thumb rule. If a current carrying conductor is imagined to be held in a right hand thumb rule says that if the current carrying conductor is imagined to be held in a right hand such that the thumb points in the direction of a current, the curved fingers of the hand indicate the direction of the magnetic field. Now this is a conductor which carries the current. If it is held in the right hand, it will show the direction of the current. If the flow of a current is in this direction, then the formation of the magnetic field around a conductor is defined by these curved fingers. Okay. Now the next law is state Fleming's left hand rule. Okay. When the current carrying conductor is being placed in an external magnetic field, if the current carrying conductor is placed in the external magnetic field. External magnetic field is the field which is not produced by this conductor. Instead, it is already present. That field is already present, and this conductor is going into that field, and it is being held in a left hand. Then the conductor experiences a force perpendicular to both the field and the direction of the current flow. The thumb defines the motion. Then the forefinger defines the field, and the middle finger defines the current. Okay. Now this is the left hand rule. Now the thumb points in the direction of the motion. Now the forefinger points in the direction of the field, and the middle finger points in the direction of a current. So these are the 4 laws, and let me finish with the list of differences. The difference between the ammeter and the voltmeter. Ammeter, it is used to measure the current, whereas voltmeter is used to measure the voltage. Ammeter is always connected in series, whereas voltmeter is always connected in parallel. Ammeter have a low resistance and the voltmeter has a high resistance. Okay, So the first it is always ammeter, as the name suggests, it is used to measure the current. Then remember, one either voltmeter or the ammeter, the opposite of which is the other one. Ammeter, it is used to measure current, then it is connected in series, then it has a low resistance. Now what is the resistivity and the resistance? The resistivity of a material is the resistance of the wire of that material of unit length and unit cross sectional area. Resistivity is the resistance itself, but it is specific. The resistance of the wire, that the material of a unit length and unit area cross section. This is the unit. Unit means 1. This is 1 meter, means unit area, cross sectional area is 1 meter. Then the resistance in this is called as resistivity. Okay, so now what is resistance? It's the opposition of the flow of a current resisting the current. It is the opposition to the flow of a current, is known as resistance. Resistivity is the intrinsic property, whereas the resistance is the extrinsic property. And the unit of resistivity is ohm meter and the unit of resistance is ohm. Now the other question is saturated and unsaturated hydrocarbons. Now what is saturated? They are having a single bond. Saturated hydrocarbons have a single bond between the carbon atoms. These are the saturated hydrocarbons. These are the saturated hydrocarbons. If the bond between the carbon atoms is single, See, this is known as saturated hydrocarbons. Then they are less reactive due to the presence of one bond between the carbon and carbon atom. They are less reactive, and the opposite for that is the unsaturated hydrocarbons. They have the double or the triple bond between the two carbon atoms, double or triple bonds, and they are more reactive. The example for saturated is alkenes and the cycloalkanes, and the unsaturated is alkenes and the alkynes. Then the other is homologous and the analogous organs, as I have mentioned in the heredity and evolution. And so the homologous organs are the organs which have the same origin and same structural design, but the different function is known as the homologous. Example for that is the limbs of a human being and the limbs of the bird. Whereas for the analogous organ, they are having a same design and origin but different function. The example for which is the wings of the insect and the wings of the bird. So this is the end of our first day plan, and the first day we had decided to complete the important biology points and along with the 4 laws and the 4 differences. So we have accomplished our goal for the first day of our science revision. So let us meet with the next goal on the second day of science revision, rapid revision class, that is the completion of the physics important points and the 4 laws and the 4 differences. So I think you enjoyed learning with me. So thank you very much. Happy learning.